Molly Keys. They will be manning the chat in case you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and get in present mode. We have almost 40 here right now. We're expecting about 60, but we want to respect your time and hopefully have some time at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get in present mode. So the first thing I'm going to present is, and Anna will put this in the chat, a link to this. It has the link to today's presentation. And it also, if we have time, the goal is to present for about 20 to 25 minutes and then mainly give you all a chance to have some time to maybe work in smaller groups. It's going to depend on the time. We had this all set up when there was about 30 something people, and I've added some breakouts at the last minute now that we're close to 60. But let me give a brief explanation. At the end, time permitting, these will be the codes, and we have a lot of elementary in this session. So we are asking that you try and keep it to no more than 10 people in each of the breakouts so that people have a chance to participate a little bit easier. But for example, if you end up in PR, which is positive reinforcement, elementary 1, and you just type in that code, you don't need to worry about capitalization or anything, then you would use the Jamboard for breakouts 1 and 2. So the codes here for breakout rooms 1 and 2, you have a Jamboard. If you end up in 3 and 4, you have a Jamboard. Middle school, we had some numbers added at the last moment, so we added a breakout, but you'll all have to kind of share this Jamboard. It should work out numbers-wise, but we'll just have to see what time we have left. So if you have any questions on that, Anna can help address that, and we'll put this in the chat again later. So I'm going to go to the main presentation now. So this is about virtual positive reinforcement systems. And you can ignore that piece at the bottom about entering your name. We have a different way we're taking attendance. So our agenda today, there are a couple main ways we're going to talk about positive reinforcement. One is communication, and along with that, relationship building is an integral part of positive reinforcement. So that's one method. And then we'll give one specific type of structure for those who might need something a little bit more specific. And then time permitting, we'll have those breakout discussion sessions at the end. So just a reminder as we get started that we have mostly elementary here. We are going to talk a little bit about high school, but in terms of a specific system, it's most difficult for high school, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We have to kind of remind ourselves we're all beginners at this, so I created a lot of systems over 19 years in the classroom, but it's a complete transformation and different picture when we're talking the virtual setting. So why this goes along with what we're seeing in the virtual setting is positive reinforcement is teachers have been talking about this lack of motivation, and that's part of positive reinforcement. We also need to be able to acknowledge and accept our own limitations of the situation we're in. There's just some things we can't control. We have to forgive ourselves for what we can't control and just focus on those things that we can with the students that are present. And everything that happened in the classroom is not equal with the virtual setting. It just does not automatically translate. So as we get to the main part here now, we're just going to make sure the session is being recorded in case you need to show to other teachers. And we'll get to the main part. So what is positive reinforcement? Primarily, it's a motivating consequence that follows a desired behavior. And I capitalize that word motivating because that's probably the most difficult thing, at least what I'm hearing from teachers, is this motivation factor. So everything has to be driven by motivation here. And this increases the likelihood that this desired behavior, the behaviors that we want to see, will be repeated as we add positive reinforcement. It doesn't mean it automatically equals stuff. Now, you can try and build that in to a system, but you still need the relationship building. You still need the positive feedback and the specific praise. So stuff can be a part of it, but it's not the only thing. You're going to need those other factors as well. So let's start with the communication and relationship building piece. So when it comes to communication, on the left, I have some strategies that can help us get to those desired behaviors. So for example, student expectations. Are you continuing to go over them with students so that they know what to expect in terms of behavior, the academic work, and if you're doing class discussions? Also, have you asked for their input? Because that's one thing that can get a little bit more buy-in, is that student input. Some specific communication tools are like structured choice and prompt and trust. So for example, if I give students 2 choices that I can live with the results of whatever they pick, that's going to help me get to those desired behaviors that we want to see. That choice is a motivating factor for a lot of them. And there's a little typo there, but prompt and trust means that you kind of tell them the desired behavior you'd like to see, and then you step away and give them that chance. So again, trust is part of that motivation and relationship building. So in terms of a specific communication tool we can use for positive reinforcement, it's positive feedback. And this is immediate, specific feedback. It helps with our classroom culture. It reinforces those expectations. So right now, a lot of people have their mics muted, and if I'm like, class, great job coming in with your mics muted, and so that we can get started with our business at hand. Or if I know cameras being on or off has been a thing that teachers have to address, so pointing out that specific behavior you want to see and thanking them for it. So one way of that positive feedback is that 5-to-1 ratio. Now I'll admit, that was never my strength. I can get pretty task oriented sometimes, and I get more involved in the to-do list. And I may be grateful for what the students are doing, but I always sometimes forgot to communicate. So 5-to-1 may be difficult for you at first, but this is something, maybe you have something tangible somewhere to remind you. So when I was trying to get better at this, I had something specifically, like when I would go around and talk to students, I had something clipped to my clipboard that was a reminder: focus on the positive, emphasize the desired behaviors. Kind of reminded me of this musician I saw giving a little concert in a little studio, and he had a happy mug because he said he gets so serious sometimes he forgets to smile. So his wife kind of has him carry around this happy mug to remind him. So using that behavior specific praise, we need to try and build this into our routines. And we may need some tangible physical reminders to do that. So another piece with the positive feedback, besides being immediate and specific, directed to the group we want, it has to be authentic. Because students and we as adults, we can tell when someone's not being authentic with their praise. And so it has to fit your personality. I'm never going to be the rah-rah type and put on a big show for the class, but just that going to that one student, maybe it's an individual email. Thank you for all the hard work you put in today. I was watching on Go Guardian, and you did a great job on staying on task. Or you can send that feedback through Go Guardian. So having that online tool. But instead of just focusing on the students that aren't on task, send those notes to those students who are doing what we ask. That's part of that positive feedback of positive reinforcement. So this came from a PBIS article, and we'll make sure you get these resources. We had a different link sheet, but we had to kind of change some things around. So you can see it reinforces what I was just talking about on the earlier slide. But let's look at point number 3. Feedback that is tied to reward. The reward must be something students actually want. And that's what's so difficult right now is kids are already at home. They already have a lot of the stuff they want right around them. So trying to find that motivation piece. And this is why we can definitely start with that communication, positive reinforcement. But if you're tying it to a reward, what type of virtual rewards can we find in? We'll give some ideas as we move forward. So the other part is we have to be building those relationships, because relationships, we know, go along with this motivation piece of students. So at the top there, what are some virtual classroom culture questions we need to ask ourselves? Is how do we envision this looking? Now, we have that vision of what we want it to look like in the class, but remember, we can't replicate that exactly. So it might be just a 5-minute segment that's helping us build that relationship in the virtual setting. Maybe it's more about the private communication. Can we have lessons and can we model this ourselves about empathy? So we know this time period is a struggle for a lot of students. Modeling that empathy towards them, planning lessons or 5-minute segments around empathy. How can we build this in to help create that classroom culture? In yellow there, I put Steve Hartman videos. He has, and I'll put a link on this a little bit later, but he has like a whole empathy lesson that is 20 minutes long, and it shows like stories from around the country of how people have expressed empathy. So it might be easier for students to see it in others than always talking about it in our own lives. So how can we build that empathy and respect? And this is the challenge, how can we utilize small groups? So I know some schools are being asked to be synchronous with their students for a whole hour, hour and a half. That's difficult time with 20 students or so to build those relationships. Can you have one little small breakout room and ask for 1 to 2 or 3 students to come in there and work in a small group? You may not be able to get to everybody every day, but you might have to start with just 1 breakout room, because I wouldn't want to design 8 breakout rooms for a group of kids starting off the year. I'm going to have to build this gradually. But these smaller breakouts and these individual reach outs are going to be one of our most effective ways of building those relationships. And that's where we can also find out, like, have those pre-written questions of one thing I'm struggling with, one thing I'm doing well with, to get very specific answers and start getting that feedback from them. So these are 5 examples of relationship building that we could do. So allowing students to teach you something. Now, if there's a video they want to show you, you might have to set it up so that you can pre-screen it. You know, I wouldn't want them just taking our chances and seeing what they come up with right there in the immediate moment. But is there a new dance or something that they want to teach you that they can show the video of? Is there a way we can include families? And not necessarily the family being involved in the meet, but the story of their families can be either way. They, like I mentioned earlier, they may not want to talk about themselves, but to build that relationship might be easier just for general discussion topics. So show them an interesting story of a video and let that be the discussion guide. They might be more willing to participate. And if they get more comfortable participating on non-academic areas, maybe it will help the academic areas' participation. Elementary teachers are great with your check-in routines, but we can also do this in middle and high school, where we dedicate a 5 minutes of a check-in. If they don't want to verbally express it, this is where we can use those online tools like Jamboard. That could be part of the routine of checking in. You have to gauge your students' comfort level, but what is the communication going to look like virtually? And how can we build that? And the 2x10 challenge. Now, this was set up for the traditional classroom where you pick one of those students that you're concerned about or you want to build that relationship more with, and you take 2 minutes a day for 10 classroom days in a row and you build that. How would this look virtually? Could it be like the 2 minutes, but it's at least one small group session each week where I'm asking them, come meet me in this little breakout room for 2 minutes. You try to do this with a few students, but we just need to adapt it. How would that look virtually? But the idea is still the same, that it's a very focused reach out that we're looking for to try and motivate the student. So those were just some ideas on communication and relationship building. Now we want to share one specific structure that you could do. And this might be with teachers who need something more tangible. And if you're not comfortable helping a teacher set something like this up, feel free to let us know, because I've helped teachers set this up before. And this is the token point system. Can we quantify behavior? Well, we quantify, and how do we use these point systems in real life? So for a high school student, showing them how, if they think a point system is silly for a classroom, probably a lot of them play sports or are involved in some type of activity where it's the game is based off a point system. So sharing those real world connections and showing them how it's done in the real world and how that same idea can translate to the classroom might be how you get this buy-in. So what are the keys to building a strong point system? Targeted behaviors. So if you're having issues with how students are using chat, then make that the focus behavior of your point system. Is the behavior measurable? So yes, I could do a camera check every 10 minutes during my Google Meet, and that's something I can very easily see who has it on and who doesn't, so I know who's still there. What time frame? How long are you going to keep the points? At the beginning of the year, a shorter time frame is better to get them accustomed to it. Are you going to keep track of individual points, small groups, whole class? What is your targeted area? What is your purpose of points? So usually the two ways people do this in the traditional classroom is through incentives. But with online learning, because our grading may be a little different, some schools are saying it's okay to have that participation section. So this could also be points for that. It shouldn't be an overwhelming part of the grade, but some schools are telling teachers, you know, participation is such a big deal in the online environment that how you can build that in, and a point system can help you do that. And again, we're back to that, what motivates them. And so this is where that student input can be beneficial. And maybe you don't reach out to all of them at once. Then maybe this is a small group thing where you could ask in small groups what motivates them. You might get more feedback. And then you can see some tips on the left. And the two I recommend the most: visualize it first and start simple. Don't try and tackle 5 to 10 behaviors when you're just starting a point system. So here's what it looked like in the traditional classroom. Some people use like a live school or class dojo. Some use tickets. Some use the jar that you filled up where you broke the kids into like the Harry Potter houses. So we know what it looks like in the traditional classroom. We have to figure out, how can we make something like this work now? So here are some tools: Class Dojo and Live School. Those are the two I've had more experience with, and so I've given you kind of a screenshot there. Classcraft is new. It kind of combines point system and a virtual gaming experience for students. And they have a free and a premium level. ClassKick is one that another teacher told us about. So we've provided links to these just so you can maybe explore these on your own. You could also take the traditional keeping points on paper method, and instead of like having it by Monday, Tuesday, you have it by a behavior you'd like to see. And you can add points as they meet the criteria. And so here you can see I targeted 2 very specific behaviors, camera check and chat usage. Maybe during the Google Meet, it's easier for you on paper, and then you put it in the online system. That's what we kind of have to visualize and see what works best for us. So final thing on the point system is you have to build it into part of your classroom routine. So one way to do this is a timer. So maybe instead of looking at the chat for the whole 30-minute session, you break it up into 3 to 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off, you assign points. And I think this is the part I've seen has been the biggest struggle for teachers, like in the traditional classroom, is building it in part of that routine. And so that it's not just kind of points given haphazardly. So a timer can help. Or you can just set that timer for 3 to 5 minutes as your personal reminder to, okay, I need to acknowledge now the positive behaviors and give that positive reinforcement. So it's 2 ways to use a timer. So finally, incentives. And K5, K8 probably has a lot more options because we're trying to look for motivations, and high schoolers have a completely different set of motivations. But I read one about like taking virtual classroom or college field trips. So the students pick a university and we spend 5 minutes taking a virtual field trip of that university. That might have more appeal to a high school student. Taking virtual field trips anywhere in the world. Maybe seniors are going to take an off year and they want to go somewhere. Maybe we can travel there virtually to give them an idea. So at the bottom here is a link to this. This is a very nice incentives blog, and it gives it by grade levels and gives you a lot of different options that you could use. But this is where I'd ask for that student input. Is this something they would be interested in? So just a reminder before the breakouts today, at the end of your last session, make sure you please fill out the feedback form that we're asking for. This feedback form can help give us information for planning future, so we give more choices on these summits. All of the information can be found on Teacher Learner Network website on the TLF resources page. And there is a link to that on that sheet we gave at the beginning. And this session has been recorded in case you'd like to share it. All 30 and 45-minute sessions have been recorded so that you can share them with teachers.